Hello, and it's the end of the month, so I'm gonna do the book review of everything I've read in October. I think it was such a perfect month to read. It was perfect weather, and I had great finds. So let's see what I read. I'm gonna read you my favorite place from this book. Actually, it's in the beginning. So ghosts are finding this boy and his family is getting killed, and he survives because the ghosts are actually kidnapping him, and so the man who killed his family, they can't find him, so obviously they need to name this toddler somehow. And one of the characters says that we could call him Marcus, and another says he looks like my nephew Harry. And then Mrs. Owens, who actually is becoming this boy's ghost mother, she says he looks like nobody but himself. He looks like nobody. So the main character's name is actually Nobody Owens. And following Nobody Owens' story, who was raised by ghosts in graveyard, Gaiman actually uses this dark humor and gothic elements to explore the themes of identity, morality, belonging, because we follow this growth, the self-growth of Nobody, and how he discovers himself, how he sees the death, the seems like freedom, life, through his, discoverings. And when you read this book, actually, I think the graveyard itself, it represents our families, our safe places, our comfort zones, and it symbolizes both this protection which we are getting from our families, and also familiarity, which is in the graveyard. Nobody actually discovers a lot of ghosts, a lot of new friends, and they are like family to him. So it's familiar to him, and he can actually use supernatural powers within the graveyard. But outside of that world, outside of the graveyard, he's a normal living boy, which is not safe outside, which has the same issues at school at the time when he goes to school as regular kids. So yeah, so this themes of family and protection are very strong, and the self-discovery, self-identity, actually finding his self-identity within the ghosts when he's not actually a ghost and he's a living boy. I bet you will enjoy this book, and especially in this spooky season, just grab it. It's a very short one, very easy read, and I love how the chapters are divided, how his self-growth is explained, and the storytelling is amazing. Just go grab this book. I think we should go over Circe next, by Madeline Miller. It's again my second book of Madeline Miller, because I loved the first one, which was I always forget the name, the Song of Achilles. It's completely different, and in Circe, actually, again, we see this Greek mythology. It's not my strong, in general, mythology, whether it's Greek mythology or Scandinavian mythology, it's not my strong, place, area, and she actually manages to reclaim the story of a minor Greek figure and transforms her, Circe, into a very powerful protagonist. What she explores, one of the key points which I mentioned for myself, is exploration of feminine strengths and independence, mythological adaptation focusing on emotional growth. We can see her emotional growth in this book. So, and also so her language is actually beautiful. It's quite hard to read, though. I think the second book was harder for me to go through it. Some parts were very, very hard to read, but it's very interesting. You want to know what happened, you want to know what it comes to, and how she reacts to certain situations, and how she, how she faces her exile, how she develops her relationships with her son later, and it's worth a read. So I would like to warn, I think for myself also, that it's very different from the first one, from the Song of Achilles. The Song of Achilles was way, way easier to read. This book, I think I got it very randomly. I saw it somewhere, a short description, and I was like, okay, I need this, and I wasn't wrong. So a little warning, the guy writes without paragraphs. As someone who, writes also a lot of papers and dissertation, it's quite interesting to see his style. It's just like there are no paragraphs in this book, and chapters are quite long, so this language actually heightens this tension and emotional factors of this book. So be ready that it's gonna be very intense. And so yeah, Paul Lynch, Prophet Song, it's a haunting dystopian narrative which is set in near future when Ireland becomes an authoritarian country. Slowly you can feel how the situation changes through this, situations which are happening with the family. So this woman, she's a mother of 4, Eilish Steck, and her husband gets arrested, and she has 4 kids, and 2 of them are grown boys, and she faces this situation when they have to go serve, and a lot of other things which are happening with her friends, with her family, her father, which she has to take care of during these hard times when the society is kind of like falling apart. And so he mostly touches on themes like resilience, family loyalty, family ties, impact of this whole authoritarianism on a single family. And I think it's really intense and raises questions about freedom, how we take everything actually for granted. And later you can just see how it grows late with her family. Actually, I didn't. I just noticed that all of my books, almost all of them, are about memory, self-identity, exile, and isolation. So one of them is Piranesi. I'm not a fantasy reader, but you can see that this month I've chosen the books which are kind of fantasy, but they are so philosophical, and it just blows my mind that how good the book can be, which is actually the winner of the Women's Prize for Fiction in 2021. It's complete, like, it's such an amazing book. I just couldn't stop thinking about it for days after reading it. I still think about it because it's so gorgeously written. And so we start the book with the character of Piranesi. We don't know what's his name. We don't know how he ended up in this labyrinth, which is set up in a very mystical world, made up with like this horse filled with statues. He has this whole routine. He has his own count of time, his ways of hunting and everything. And he thinks that there are only 2 people who are alive in the world. So the novel structure is very like reminiscent of fantasy, yet very philosophical, as I said. And so Piranesi doesn't know who he is, how he ended up in this world. And with him you are discovering through his diary, which is his writing for a long time, who he is, and how he ends up finding his true self, and how he actually reacts to this discovery of who he really is and how he ended up there, which actually shows up how the person can change and how your self-identity changes based on your environment, your self-perception when you're actually alone and isolated. It's such a great book, such a gorgeous writings, and it's really I just like want you to read this, and I truly can recommend it because it's a very atmospheric writing style. It's very important for me whenever I start reading a book. This writing style is one of the most controversial things for me, which actually affects my further liking of the book. And lastly, we have Ghost at the Watchman by Harper Lee. I read Harper Lee this year, in the beginning of this year, and he offers actually, ouch! And lastly, I think it's the last book which I've read this month, yeah. It's Harper Lee, Ghost at the Watchman, and I've read Harper Lee first time this year, in the beginning of this year, and I've been dying to finally read another book of her. And yeah, it's a controversial follow-up to Kill a Mockingbird, because I didn't know actually that it's a follow-up, that it's going to be again about Atticus Finch and already grown-up Scout Finch. The novel actually examines again the themes of racial tensions, idealism, moral complexities. We see that she comes back to her town, Maycomb, and she faces this change of scenery, and her aunt, her father got older, and she can see all his flaws, and yeah, it's amazing. I know that I read that a lot of people didn't like it, but here are some points which are actually loved. Again, we come back to the themes of self-identity. So she grows up, and she grows up with Atticus Finch being one of her idols. And when she starts seeing his flaws, when she starts discovering his attitude toward racism in this book, which is set after World War II, she doesn't know how to react to this. And obviously people also, they don't want to intervene in this like father-daughter relationships, because they know how Atticus is actually a watchman for Jean Louise. And yeah, she just discovers that now he's her own person, and it's actually gorgeous. This last part is, I reread it a few times, because you see how she changes, how she accepts, I think, that that she has now her own self-identity, and it's not only based on whatever Atticus was telling to her. Well, actually, it's very hard to explain it, but it's very like complex character development here. I love this one. I loved To Kill a Mockingbird, but as an adult, I think I love this more. And I love the themes. I loved rereading some of the parts, and yeah, I wouldn't actually listen to the bad reviews. I would grab this book. It answers to a lot of personal questions, a lot of reflection on your personal societal beliefs, and how they can be sometimes very different from whatever you've grown up with. And yeah, and the belonging again, because she came back from New York to Maycomb, and she doesn't feel like she belongs there anymore, because a lot of things changed. She's changed, and she was expecting Maycomb to become home again, but she rediscovers it, I think, as an adult, and it's very gorgeous. Alright, I think that was it for October reads. I'm gonna leave it here. I'm gonna let you also read these books and, you know, consider reading this. It's very philosophical months, I think, for me.